There it is. I couldn't help it. So Packers remain number one in the NFC North. Packers got the win in Cincinnati. Packers take on the Bears tomorrow. It is Bears week. So how are you feeling about Bears week? How are you feeling about the game? Excited or scared? And what else do you have to say about what's going on with your life on Sunday?
Yeah. So the Bear, I was actually looking at the cost of tickets today, just like on a lark. What if I were to like drive up to Chicago, go see the game? Like now that I'm like have the taste for what it's like to be at a game. But I mean, I couldn't go Sunday because that's actually my mother-in-law's birthday party is on Sunday, so I'm not about to miss that. But like, I just want to say, like, how much would it cost? So expensive. But the Bears game, I mean, I think we're going to win. I'll start with that. I think that their defense is really, really good. I think that because they are. So, like, it's not going to be an easy game. I don't think that. But their offense isn't great. So I think, like, they're just not going to be able to, like, go toe-to-toe with us on that. And I love Bears Week, because I think I've probably said it here before. I've known a lot of Bears fans. I lived in Chicago for 6 years. And would often wear Packers gear out in public and never really got like a hard time for it. Like, I'd be like Packers stuff, football, that kind of thing. But you're like, we are fans of the same thing, and that is cool. And we can bond over that, Like I've never had a bad experience with a Bears fan. So, major props to the Bears fandom generally. But I love Bears Week on Twitter with all the memes and all the sort of like, back and forth. And, somebody always posts the Randall Cobb again kid, which I love. That always cracks me up. I actually posted it myself this week. So yeah, I love Bears Week. It's great.
Yeah. I kind of chimed in on something, and I should have used my personal account, but sometimes I don't know whether I'm on my personal account or our podcast. Hey, we like your pod on Twitter. So I think it was CBS or one of the stations. I'm not sure who's covering it, but are you a Packers fan or a Bears fan? And it was kind of like you just say Packers or Bears as the answer, right? It wasn't a poll, but it was pretty straightforward. And the first comment I noticed, Niebels was engaging with this guy, but he said, the Packers fans, they're only fans of the Packers because they have Aaron Rodgers and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I guess he's so I had to chime in, and I said, how to say you're a Bears fan without saying you're a Bears fan? You complain about Packers fans. Like, that's it. Like, they're more concerned about the Packers than on Twitter than the actual fandom of their team. It seems, but that's a Twitter thing, like you mentioned.
Well, that's like what Aaron Rodgers was saying in his press conference from, I want to say Wednesday, maybe, or Tuesday. He's talking about, it was Wednesday, I think. He's talking about how the coaches seem to talk, the Chicago coaches seem to talk more about like trying to beat the Packers as being the thing for the year, and not as much like, winning the Super Bowl or getting anywhere near that. Which I think is a good observation. I think Aaron Rodgers is totally right about that. So yeah.
I think he is too. My sister has mentioned that over the years, that even about the Vikings, that their goal in the locker room is to beat the Packers, win the division, where our goal is to get to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl. So what kind of superlatives do you have for us this week?
So 3 as usual. Kind of is going to take me through the range of emotions, actually, and my reaction to the game. So, as I mentioned before, walking out of the game, I was kind of exhausted emotionally and physically, and honestly trying to make sense of what I had just seen, because it was so confusing and so weird and so crazy, right? And just the later I got into it, the less my brain could process and retain the facts and like make sense. So I knew that our pal Sarah Kelleher was going to have an amazing recap up that night. I knew that was where I needed to go to read, to like start to sort things out and tease out the details and kind of like make some sense of it. Now, honestly, I could put Sarah in my superlatives every single week, and I'm not going to do that, because like we need to spread the love around, obviously. But like, it was so clutch this week to be able to read hers, because it was like, okay, that's what happened. I see now. Here's the context. Here's where it went crazy. Like here was the craziness that we went through.
Yeah.
So I got most clarifying for Sarah Kelleher for her recap for Cheesehead TV. It's always so good. Everyone should be reading that. She's so good at writing those. My next superlative, number 2, most surprising. So I've talked about Blue 58, the only podcast of the powersweep.com, hosted by John Meerdink. I've talked about that a lot already this year. And one of the things that I love about John Meerdink, in fact, I think that I've like tried to like take as an example of like how you should have certain parts of your show that are the same every week, as Don and I have discussed offline, is he always ends the show with this thing about, because as I always say, smarter Packers fans are better Packers fans, and better Packers fans are what we all want to be. It's like how he ends the show every time. And I love that. It's so brilliant. So at the end of the episode, because he did an episode right after the game was over. Instead of that, he went, boy, football's a dumb sport. I'll leave you with that. I won't even talk about being a smarter Packers fans because I feel like we all got dumber having seen that, which just blew my mind. I was laughing loudly. And so that was most surprising. My second superlative, most surprising to John Meerdink for an unusual and characteristic sign off for him that really encapsulated a lot of the game. We were all dumber for having watched it.
That's right.
So I heard that after I had read, Sarah's recap. So I was like, okay, I made sense of it. And then like, now here's more of a commentary on it, which really made me laugh. And then kind of like thinking through, like just as the week was going and as the emotions were kind of like settling in, my third superlative is funniest. So there's this dude, Matt Mamba, who does this series of short videos for Cheesehead TV. They're called Unstable Packers Fan. And he did one a couple weeks ago about Mason Crosby, where he has this whole song about Mason Crosby and a dance. He has a Crosby dance and a rap. And so this week, with such a big Mason Crosby game, he did like kind of like almost like a sequel to it. And it was so good. I quote tweeted it earlier in the week when I saw it to shout him out. Definitely, I highly recommend Unstable Packers Fan by Matt Mamba. The one from this week was amazing. It was so good. So yeah, that's what I got. Don, I got most clarifying, most surprising, and funniest. Any thoughts on that? Or do you want to go to yours?
Yeah. And Sarah, I hope Sarah's feeling better because she was not feeling well this week. So if you're listening, Sarah, we hope you're feeling better and back on your feet soon. We missed you on Wednesday. I actually listened on Wednesday for once. And I caught John's as well. I wanted to catch as much. I couldn't read anything that night because I was I couldn't read anything. Maybe because my brain got dumber. Maybe that was the reason I couldn't read. But and that was a special podcast too. Didn't he say he doesn't normally go on right after the game? Yeah, I recall that. Yeah. Very good. John sounds like such a, you know how people's voices, you picture somebody's, how they look based on their voice. And he's got the most interesting, the most distinguished voice. Sounds very, very like a mature, distinguished, white-haired man.
I know, and he's younger than me.
Young.
He's I think I want to say he's like in his maybe early mid-30s.
I think so. He just had his first baby, so I think
yeah.
So,
but
shout out to
he's got that stentorian tone voice that's sort of like it would be at home on NPR, or like in like newscasters from like the 50s and 60s or whatever. Like, got a voice. He's got a good voice for this stuff.
He does. I like a good voice. There are a few voices that I'm very they're very easy for me to listen to. So this week I have 3 superlatives. They're all the same, basically the same genre, and it's best teachers. 1 superlative, best teachers, and 3 talents. And so the first one is our Paul Brettel, and his take on the best reason Crosby was hooking left, because that was the question I had. What happened? Why are they not? Was it wind? And I didn't hear much conversation about wind, so I didn't think it was that. So on Packers Unrestricted podcast, Paul mentioned, he said Crosby missed, he missed the extra point and 3 field goals. but it wasn't the last field goal. So thankfully he made that last field goal, which gave us the game, thankfully. So Paul shared his insights about the Green Bay Packers' wild overtime win Sunday and made a few quick observations about Crosby's kicking performance. And so for like a novice, myself, who knows nothing or very little about football, just kind of getting into it, his take on the Packers' block field goal attempts being threatened more often than what is ideal helped clarify this for me a little bit. It's like, of course, they were trying to block it, but more importantly, it rang a bell because that has happened in the last 3 games. So this has to do with our special teams defense unit out there trying to protect that punt kick, so or that field goal kick. So I did a little extra research on this, so it made me a little better of a student. So I tend to, it's like looking up what's supposed to happen, how this is supposed to work, and so now I just have generally speaking, a better idea of what to look for in future games when it comes to that field goal kick and what's happening, with all of those players, not just the kicker. It's not like they're standing in isolation just kicking that ball. They have to deal with people running, and they don't. And he mentioned that even a half a second can make a difference between a clean kick and a contested kick. So so he said, and he also mentioned that Matt LaFleur, Coach Matt, by the way, that's where I get Maddie from, because Rogers calls Coach Matt Maddie, and I have a tendency of calling people their names, and so that's kind of you're kind of like the coach, and I'm sort of I'm certainly not a player, but somebody trying to learn. But Coach Matt had said it wasn't all Crosby's fault during the press conference, but he didn't say why, and so that's why Paul kind of looked into it and took a look again, replayed the game before he did his podcast. And he said from the right side of the formation, the opponents are loading up and getting through way too easily on the right side, which is why he's hooking left. Interesting. So like I said, LaFleur said that those were not all Crosby's fault, and it is very scary because this could have cost the game. So the other side note is that Paul, speaking of voices, Paul sounds somewhat like my nephew. So I enjoy listening to him too. So did you actually see all of that, Matt, when you were at the game?
No, I would say that I saw that. I will say that the south end zone, there was a fair amount of wind there, and you could see that more, excuse me, from the stands, because there was like a, there's a flag, a big old American flag just outside of the stadium that was really blowing hard. I guess it'd be blowing west to east, which would be taking things too far left, from that end zone. So I think that affected at least some of them on that side, but I don't remember who's were on which side at what point. So they're at least in the south end zone, there's a fair amount of wind going on. But I do totally think that's a really, really good theory that Paul put forward there. And just a side note about Paul Brettel, if you don't mind me just jumping in here on this, it is shocking that this is the first time Paul Brettel has come up on our show. He is a good take machine, and he just produces so much content, and he's amazing. I'm a huge fan of Paul Brettel. Huge fan.
Yeah, he's great. Well, that's great. I was curious if you saw all that, and I do think Andy Herman might have said something about that too, which would make sense, of course. Not in any depth, and Paul didn't go into a ton of depth either, but just I did hear it from at least one other person who knows something about football aside from myself. So the next best teacher, or not the next best, but the next one in line, I shouldn't have said it that way. I'm calling it most digestible and delectable film breakdowns.
Ooh.
And that's going to Dusty Evely, who is Dusty but Spookier on Twitter. And, so he had a couple of things this week that I just started noticing. And again, maybe because I'm becoming a little bit better student, or I'm trying. So he has a comprehensive, what I call a 6-course dinner plus dessert film breakdown. It's in the Passing Chronicles 2021 week 5, and that's on cheeseheadtv.com. So Dusty in this one looked back, and this is going to be linked in our show notes so you can look at it if you like. Dusty looks back at 7 plays from this game, the Packers' victory over the Bengals. And if he has film clips, he has stills, he has diagrams with thorough but super easy to understand copy. So he explains everything so even I can sort of understand it. So again, that's on Cheesehead TV. He also has some great work on 247 Sports this week, and every week really. But also why I wanted to mention Dusty is because he has also smaller, easy to digest snacks on his Twitter feeds every day. So on his timeline every day with little game video clips and just a little quick comment and great conversation in the threads. So if you're not interested in looking at an article or listening to a whole podcast, you can follow Dusty and pick up an awful lot just on his short but sweet snack size film breakdown on his Twitter, in his tweets. So great follow is Dusty. And so again, Dusty has most digestible and delectable film breakdown. And the best stat from the last teacher on my 3 superlatives is the best stat for Bears Week, and that goes to Perry Goldstein. And this is a fun little stat this is a fun little stat from Packers dope sheet, and I'm quoting here. This is a fun little stat from Packers dope sheet on the reacquired wide receiver Randall Cobb. He has 9 receiving touchdowns against the Bears, and the most he's had against any other team. And also it puts him at number 3 in Packers history against Chicago, only behind Don Hutson and Billy Houghton, who has 15 and 10s. So Perry co-hosts Packs What She Said with Maggie Loney, who we love both of them, who Maggie happens to live very near where I grew up. Very near.
Oh, really?
So sometimes she talks about where she is. I'm like, I know where that is. In fact, I went to college in where she lives. So my college was there. So,
nice.
So that's my 3 superlatives, the best teachers on those 3 and those 3 talented writers, podcasters, and just overly super fun people.
Yeah. Dusty's film breakdowns are a big part of what kind of like drew me into Packers Twitter a couple of years ago, because I would see them sometime on my timeline when I was trying to look for other Packers stuff. I was like, this is cool. I'm going to see more of this guy's stuff. That's how I got to start to get to know who Dusty was. And pretty much him and Aaron Nagler's posts were the ones that initially kind of like drew me in. And Dusty was really good a couple years ago. He's gotten even better over time at like making things super clear and easy to digest, like you said, and so insightful. Big fan
and also
of Dusty.
Fun.
Yeah.
Also fun and a little spooky. I'm not into the spooky part.
He's also a huge horror movie aficionado. Indeed.
So this is probably a great month for him.
Yeah, exactly. And Perry's amazing. Her work with Maggie and her work on the Packaday podcast. I think she's on every other Monday, if I remember correctly.
With Andy. Yeah. Post game.
And Alex.
Yeah, which is fun. She was on this week with Andy and Alex Strauss.
Yeah.
Yes, and he has a really great voice too. For
he does. he has a very radio announcery voice. It's wonderful.
Very much so. And you would think he's also quite more beyond his years. That I think he just graduated college.
Yeah, I think he's quite young. Yes.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. Just saying we
Right.
can sound older or younger than we really are. So Matt, any final thoughts? Anything else you wanted to add this week?
Just really looking forward to the Bears game. Going back to texting with my dad during it, and I love Packers versus Bears. It's one of my favorite things. I mean, and that's especially because, again, like I said, the Bears fans have always been so what's the word? I guess respectful, really, you know? So I feel
That's
like a
great.
mutual respect between these teams. And I really like that
Yeah.
a lot. So that's good stuff.
Love
Final
that.
thoughts, just looking forward to the game basically. And so I'm just going to ask you here, Don, where can people find you on the socials?
Well, we have our podcast Twitter, which is, of course, Hey, We Like Your Pod, and it's at Hey Willip, which is HEYWLYP. On Twitter, we have Hey, We Like Your Pod on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Instagram. And me personally, I am Dawn DeQuisto. That's DAWNDACQUISTO. I know that's not a very easy spelling, so that's usually why I don't mention it, but you can find me there. I'm all over all of the platforms, but if you're on Twitter, that's what you would look for. If you were on YouTube, that's what you would look for. If you're on Facebook, that's what you. So I'm pretty consistent, unusual name. And what about you, Maddie?
Yeah, I'm at Matt Trombone on Twitter. That's 3 T's in the middle, Matt Trombone. Friends, please subscribe, rate, and share Hey, We Like Your Pod wherever you listen. It helps us grow our audience and keep us doing what we do. I need to change how I worded that. It keeps us doing what we do, so we do.
It helps us do what we do. It helps us keep doing what we do.
We'll
Here's a
workshop
little-
that.
I love it. I love it. I think we understand. And yeah, and it's interesting when I'm looking on to find out what you posted for the day on Twitter. I use the search button a lot on Twitter. I don't know why, but like, even though I'm following somebody, I just type in Matt with 3 T's and it starts auto-filling. I don't think there are too many Matts with 3 T's.
Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah, Matt Trombone. I love that. So yeah, and it really does help us when you share, certainly when you listen. We love to hear from you, what you think of our show, any suggestions, and we'll be starting to book some guest hosts and guests on our podcast soon. Yes, we
Ooh.
will. We wanted to make sure we kind of had ourselves together before we brought anyone in on the dumpster fire. But we do appreciate you so much. We appreciate all of you joining us here. Matt and I are both so glad to know you, to be fans of you, and to have the luxury of being fans of the most storied team in the NFL. We appreciate your support, your subscriptions, and sharing our pod, and we look forward to seeing you next week on
Hey, We Like Your Pod.
Happy Bears Week, everyone.
Happy Bears Week. Yay.
So, Matt,
Yeah.
did I tell you that and I was retweeting
Thank you.